Good day everyone, Grumos here with another video, and today I want to take a quick look at something a little different. Some warship designing and naval combat in a game called From the Depths. This game I first saw on RamJB's channel a week or so ago, and I have to admit I never heard of it before, but what I saw from it I found quite intriguing, so I decided to give it a try myself. And I was quite impressed with the game. As a matter of fact, I sunk a lot of hours into it last week, so I figured I might as well make a video about it too. And I do think that the game provides a lot of content and a lot of fun if you like this kind of game, especially for its price. It's $20 on Steam in early access at the moment. Not that I would have noticed too much of the early access, seems to be in a pretty good state already, I would say. So, what is From the Depths and what does it offer, other than a name that is annoying to pronounce for non-native speakers? Well, the main part of the game revolves around designing your own ships and other vehicles, for example also submarines, helicopters, airship fortresses, and eventually also tanks. Similar than for example Space Engineers, or also a little bit like Kerbal Space Program, though less scientific and more combat oriented than KSP. But as with KSP or Space Engineers, that is where a large part of the fascination and the addictive properties of the game are coming from. It is just fun designing your own ships and other vehicles and making them work, and see how they do against other ships. Like my little catamaran attack frigate here. And this part of the game can get pretty complex, as you can design pretty much every aspect of the vehicle yourself. The hull, the engine, the weapon systems, down to the makeup of the shells your guns fire. And after you build your ship or other vehicle, there is of course the AI control of said ship. You can of course also control the ship yourself manually, steer it and fire the weapons manually, but it is also important for good ship design that the ship can fight on its own without you helping, use its weapons correctly and maneuver in a way to take advantage of the ship's design, get to the correct range, right broadside angle and so on, and of course not crash into things. The AI setup for my ships here is still a work in progress, by the way. Since the vehicles are of course made out of blocks, you get automatically a pretty good quasi-damage model too. So you have to for example take into account things like redundancy, so that you for example don't lose control over all your weapons because one control line is cut by enemy fire. I'm just a big fan of creative games like this. There are so many possibilities and things to take into account. You can create completely new designs or try to rebuild real-world ships. However, creating and designing your ships and other vehicles is only one part of the game, though it is the main one for me. But other than the design and building part of the game, we also got a lot of different game modes to play and use those vehicles in as well. For example, different campaigns where you're supposed to conquer the planet, or one of the planets, as there are different ones in the game, and depending on which one you play on, you got different rules. For example, there's one which focuses on recreating World War II naval units. That means you have a lot of opportunities to actually use your own designs in campaigns and missions. And those campaigns are also where it is then somewhat important that your designs also make a bit of sense and are somewhat resource efficient, and that the AI knows what to do with your ship, so that you can get the most out of the resources in the campaign and that you can send your fleets out and the ships in it can fight without you holding their hand. Fighting in the game reminds me also a bit of games like the old Battlezone, in the sense that you can control your units from the first person perspective directly and even run around in them, or just give them orders remotely and play it like a strategy game. Just that you build all your units yourself, and on top of that the game has a multiplayer mode, so you can also play co-op campaigns, which is something I find quite intriguing as well, since if you do design your own vehicles and so on, it's just a lot of fun to show them off to your friends and look at their stuff as well. You can also man larger ships together, taking control of different weapons for example. That is certainly something I will look into a bit more in the future. Now, we take a quick look at the start of the campaign at the end of the video to show some of the basics of what is going on there. But first, let me give you a bit of a quick overview of the things you can do when designing your own vehicles. Nothing in depth, just a very quick first look. Now, you have different materials to work with, like wood, metal, heavy armor and the like, to build your hull. A lot of options to customize your propulsion systems, build engines to drive propellers, or even put a jet engine on your boat if you want. Or for earlier technology also, for example sailing or a battle steamer. Well, when you got a ship that can swim and can move, you need some weapons on it, which you can also design in detail. Turrets, cannons, missiles, torpedoes and the like, which all provide a lot of options to form them into what you want them to be. For example, if your missile has a rocket engine in the back, well, it is a missile. If you put a torpedo propeller and a ballast tank on it, it's a torpedo. If you don't put any propulsion on it, but a proximity fuse and set a ballast tank on it to hold a certain depth in the water, you got a mine. And if you do the same and set the ballast tank in such a way that the thing will sink, you got a depth charge. In theory, you could build a torpedo launcher with lots of boosters that fires the torpedo out backwards, and a torpedo with a delay on the propulsion activation, and build a weapon that can fire a torpedo backwards over a close enemy ship, and then the torpedo activates on the other side and hit it from behind while it is coming at you. I don't know why you would do that, but you could if you wanted to, and that's just cool. Or maybe a bit more practical, set the torpedo to sink to a certain depth before it activates versus submarines. On very high-tech designs you can even put shields and lasers. Better technology and materials are of course more resource-intensive and expensive though, so if you just build the biggest ships you can get out of the most expensive materials, you won't be able to build them at the start of the campaign. Though that depends on the difficulty setting of the campaign, of course, but in any case you will most likely need some cheaper, lower technology designs at the start of a campaign till you get some more resources. In the background you can see a little torpedo boat that is roughly based on a PT boat and I designed as a cheap starting unit for the campaign mode, for example. This one was my second finished ship design. Now, after the vehicle moves and has weapons, you need to set the ship's AI up in such a way that it can use the weapons correctly, as well as a detection system so the AI can even see enemy ships in order to attack them, as well as friendly ships in order to avoid collisions with them. So there's a lot of possibilities here to be creative and that can get really addictive. For example, take my first ship design. I started building that one before the torpedo boat when I just got the game, and that one started out on the first day I played as just a simple mining platform I wanted to build quickly in a survival mode, as well as a test of what you can do in the game. After building a bit on that though, I thought, well, I could turn it into a catamaran combat ship. And in the middle of doing so I figured, well, if it's a combat ship, better make it out of iron, and maybe a bit larger. And that, after more hours than I care to admit, eventually led to the Mad Cat class attack frigate, my first finished ship in from the depth. Though finished is relative, there are still a lot of changes planned and improvements to make to the design. So let me give you a quick tour of the ship in its current state, which hopefully shows off some of the possibilities of the game and what you can do. Well, the Mad Cat is designed as a fast attack craft. It is not well armored, but it is well armed and is meant to keep its distance against stronger opponents and use its longer range weapons like torpedoes at range while staying out of effective range of high explosive large caliber cannons. It is obviously a catamaran design, which I hoped would have less drag and go faster, and since in an earlier version it tended to rise the bow up too much when going fast and flipping over backwards, I added some underwater wings to the rear to provide some lift at the stern and keep it from dropping too much. Though the ship has since gotten a bit slower, so it is not necessary at the moment, but I do plan on making it faster again with some improvements in the future. I have some additional props more in the front, which was done to counter the speed loss as the ship got heavier, and they are in the front to also counter the earlier tendency of the ship to raise its bow too much with all the thrusters in the rear, though I need to work on that some more to get the speed I want again. Now for armament we got 8 rearward-facing torpedo launchers in the stern, which fire shorter close-range torpedoes, the idea being that the ship first opens up with longer-range weapons firing to the front, and as it gets too close, it turns around to increase the distance again, firing the shorter-range rearwards torpedoes at the point where it is closest to the enemy. Then we got 4 180mm cannons, 2 fast-firing ones in forward-facing turrets and 2 less capable ones with a lower rate of fire in sponsons in the sides of the ship. As sidewards-facing weapons are not that important for the attack profile that the ship is supposed to do. Now, directly in front of the bridge we have a 6-pack forward-facing missile launcher which fires laser-guided missiles with the laser designators directly on top of the bridge. Should those missiles fire while the ship is in a turn, it has laser designators in the sides to keep guiding the missile as the ship turns around. And all the way in the bow I have 6 more missiles in vertical launch cells. These ones are radar guided, but relatively short ranged as there isn't much space up here. The primary weapon of the ship in most situations, though, are located below those. 4 torpedo launchers with long-range torpedoes. Those are quite powerful and can reach quite far out, giving the ship the ability to fire powerful weapons at long range and then turn away from its opponent right away again, which is useful against stronger opponents. The torpedoes have explosive warheads, which get a bonus underwater, as well as a proximity fuse, so they still go off on a near miss. So that's it with the current weapon system loadout for the ship at the moment. For detection systems, so the AI can detect enemy ships to use those weapons against them, I have a 360-degree active radar on top of the bridge, as well as a laser rangefinder and an infrared camera. Now, that is one of the things I have to adjust a bit, as the ship's tracking capabilities at the moment are suboptimal. Tracking equipment in the game has different stats for how precise they are at providing range, as well as bearing data, and how fast they update this data. My laser rangefinder gives me good range data, but is not so great at giving precise bearings. So I will add another tracker that is better at that to get a better resolution for my guns. Most likely a IR tracker in place of the IR camera. And for underwater detection as well as redundancy, in case the sensor tower gets hit, I have sonar equipment under the ship as well. Also on the bridge I have a missile tracker to detect incoming missiles, which will be used for a missile defense system which I have not designed yet. Well, let's take a look inside. Here we got the main bridge, with steering and remote weapon controls in front, when you control the ship yourself, as well as the main AI core in the rear of the bridge, as well as a shell customizer to customize the shells fired by the gun. Both the AI core and the shell customizers are not 100% finished in this version of the ship. Now, since the AI core is vulnerable up here, I have 2 backup cores in front of the gun turrets to take over basic functions if the main core gets hit, though at a reduced capability since the backup cores don't have the same CPU power as the main core. And here we have the rear engine room, with the small sponson gun up on the roof, and the connection to the AI core behind it, the white blocks, which connect the local weapon controller to the AI core so the AI can control the gun. You can also build a wireless connection, but that one can be detected by wireless snooper. I'm not sure yet how much of a problem that would be though. Since this isn't exactly a stealth ship, I doubt it would be much of a problem. The engine is the first I have built in the game and therefore not optimal, so I have to revisit it at a later point. At the moment it is a fuel-injected 12-cylinder engine, and there are 2 of them. 1 per hull, giving me a lot of power, enough that the ship should be able to go faster than it does now. Again, I still have to optimize a few things here. And behind the engine we have the controls for the rear torpedo tubes. Behind the stairs are the magazines behind the metal wall. Now, 1 section further ahead we have the gun room. Here 2 hulls are connected. This is where the 2 main gun turrets are installed, and in the front of them we have a backup AI cores, 1 on each side, as well as an electric engine with batteries, which get charged by the main engine. Those are here as backups as well. In case both main engines are knocked out, we will still have some emergency power from the electric engines. And we also have some fuel and general storage down here. Now, in front of the 2 gun turrets we have the 2 bow weapon rooms, with the vertical launch cells for the radar-guided missiles, as well as the controls for the forward torpedo tubes. The red and green bars you sometimes see coming from the weapon controllers are the weapon restrictions I have set up, so the AI knows when to fire at what weapon and not to fire the rear torpedo tubes at the target in the front and the other way around. Now that is a bit of a basic tour of my first ship design. I hope it gives a bit of an impression of some of the things you can do in the game and what goes into designing a ship or other vehicles in it. And by that I mean just a vehicle. Designing the weapons that go on it, especially the gun turrets and cannons, are a story of their own. Take my 180mm single barrel gun turrets, which I currently have on the Mad Cat class. Now a 180mm gun isn't too impressive, though those in the turret have a nice rate of fire. But to get a bit of an impression of what is going on under the hood of such a turret, I have removed the deck and armor of one of the turrets, so you can see the inside a bit better. There is a lot of machinery under a turret itself that spins with it, which is needed to make the gun, the cannon, what it is. Parts that influence the cannon's caliber, for example, its rate of fire, its recoil and so on, as well as automatic loaders to load the gun, and ammo clips. And those parts don't just fit together in any way you want, so building a size-efficient but powerful gun and a turret takes some thought. Because if it is an inefficient design, it's either weaker than it could be, or it's taking up so much space that the ship needs to be huge to carry it. You also want to try to hide most of the turret's components inside the hull, if you can, so you don't have a huge turret on top of the hull that can be easily shot off. Now, the size requirement of my turrets are, by the way, also the reason why I have two single-barrel ones side by side instead of one multi-barrel turret in the space in the middle. Having two turrets side by side like this is of course not very efficient, as they block their field of fire to the side and you have extra weight from having two turrets. But the original Mad Cat design did not have a connection between the two hulls in the middle at all, so I needed two turrets. Those, however, became too big, so I needed to widen the hulls to fit them and connect the two hulls in the middle, which created a space where I could fit a turret in the middle, which wasn't there at first. So I do plan to eventually replace the two single-barrel turrets which are side by side with a new triple-barrel turret I'm currently working on in the middle of the ship, as well as some other upcoming designs. Now that will require to move the laser-guided missile battery to another place, maybe the turret itself. We will see how it turns out. I am also playing with other options to place the missiles more efficient and other armament options for the ship. There are quite a few ideas I have for the Mad Cat alone, and that is not even talking about upcoming other designs. So as you can see, there's a lot to think about, but the game is also a paradise for tinkerers who like to try stuff, design things and constantly come up with ways to make them better, and then blow stuff out of the water with them more efficiently. Well then, that's a bit of a basic overview of the things you can build in the game. Let's take a quick look at the start of the campaign. There are a few different ones you can choose from, and they differ in, for example, what enemy factions you will meet and how much of the map is accessible in the campaign, and of course the backstory of it. Now in this case we play the Deepwater Guard faction, which are mostly pirates, versus the Onyx Watch, which is a sort of merchant guild inspired by the Hanseatic League as far as I can tell. The Onyx Guard uses mostly designs that is inspired by old sailing ships, but make no mistake, they do have some modern weapons. While the Deepwater Guard is of course a more pirate-inspired faction, though in this case when we play themselves that does not really matter, as of course we use our own designs. After you start with the campaign you land on your starting fortress, and usually you have a small boat at the beginning too to use, though usually I just turn it into resources to build my own designs. From here your objective is more or less to conquer the map and defeat the other factions on the map, which is pretty big. The starting fortress is equipped with some basic defenses as well as resource gatherers, and you start inside the resource zone. Those zones are scattered over the map and are indicated by a large green circle, and as you would expect allow you to mine resources. So they are important pieces of real estate, and it's important to hold a few of them to get the necessary resources to build your ships. The fortress is also equipped with some other equipment, like a blueprint spawner, where you can spawn your designed ships, which then get built by the fortress's repair arm, as long as you have the resources to build them of course. And a tractor beam to dock ships to the fortress, which is useful for construction and repair of vehicles. I start off with ordering the construction of one of my torpedo boats, which I designed as starting unit for a campaign. I plan on constructing a few of my Mad Cat frigates after that, once I have the resources to do so, and then use those to go out and search for some more resource zones where I can get more resources and a few enemy fleets to destroy. However, I don't quite get this far. Shortly after my torpedo boat is finished, I already have an enemy fleet coming in. A scouting force, at least that is what it is called. When two enemy fleets on a map get close enough to each other, you or the enemy can start the battle. You can then deploy your units where you want them, a formation that makes sense for example, though in this case there isn't much to deploy for me, as we only have our one torpedo boat finished, as well as our starting fortress though. The enemy force has only one ship too, a Essen-class ship, which I haven't seen before of course, as this is my first real campaign. But the Essen has almost 6 times the displacement of my torpedo boat, this much information I get from the map. Luckily I got my fortress weapons as well in the fight, so we should look pretty good here. Now with only 2 friendly units in the fight, I set the fortress to fight under AI control, but I take direct control of my little torpedo boat. This little ship really can't take much damage, so I have to keep moving a lot to avoid enemy fire, if at all possible. I do have powerful torpedoes on it though, so my plan is to fire them on longer range on the enemy ship, longer range for this little boat anyway, and then increase the distance again when I get too close, zigzagging to avoid enemy fire. The Onyx watch ship, the Essen, looks like a sailing ship, and those sails do work, but again the ship's guns are modern and powerful, and pretty much one hit from one of those guns has a good chance to rip my ship apart. And the Essen has normal propellers too, so it's not that slow. After firing my first torpedo salvo, I turn around to get away from the Essen again a bit, and the enemy ship's salvos just barely miss my little boat. I placed my boat too close to the enemy ship on the deployment screen, I think. I should have started at longer range to get more torpedoes out before I have to turn around again. Now I got a few more of my torpedoes in the water, and the torpedoes on this torpedo boat are even more destructive than the ones I have on the Mad Cat class ships, because on my torpedo boat the launchers have a limited traverse and can aim in the direction of the enemy. That allows me to remove the one-turn module from the torpedoes that on the Mad Cat with its fixed torpedo tubes turn the torpedoes towards the enemy after launch, and that extra space I filled with more explosives. They are sonar guided and have a proximity fuse, so they do go off even on a near miss. I got a few hits by now, and also got very lucky that I never took a hit in return, as one of the enemy high explosive shells might well be enough to blow my entire boat out of the water. The enemy ship has to be damaged by now too though. After all, I saw a few of my torpedoes hit, and the enemy ship is not that big, about the same size class than my own Mad Cat class ships, so there are limits to how much armor it can have, and it does appear to be lower in the water than before, and not moving much anymore by now. But even more importantly, I noticed that the enemy ship has ceased firing. Something big must have broken on the enemy ship. Either the mainframe lost connection to the weapons and can't control them anymore, or for example the ammo stores blew up and the enemy ship is out of ammo. But in any case, if the enemy ship doesn't fire anymore, well, let's be pirates and enter it. If I am on the enemy ship when the AI core gets destroyed on the Essen, I can capture it. That means if I can enter the enemy ship, find the AI core and then destroy it myself with my submachine gun, the enemy ship is mine. I have to be somewhat quick about it though. My little cannon and the fortress guns are still shooting at it, and I assume the ship may have some sort of repair pods that can repair the ship and restore its capability to fire if I order my fortress to stop firing at it. So I stop my torpedo boat in order to jump over the side and get over to the enemy ship, looking for its AI core. Now I have trouble locating it at first, as I don't know the layout of the enemy ship, but then, just when I find it, my fortress gun lands a direct hit on the enemy AI core and takes it out for me. So, the battle is over and we got a new ship for our efforts, or what's left of it anyway. I at first tried to sail the newest addition to our pirate fleet back to my fortress on my own, but it is too heavily damaged to steer, and I don't have the resources out here to properly repair it. Luckily, we are still close enough to my fortress that I can use the fortress tractor beams to reel the Essen in and start repairing it at home. Now that we have the ship, we can either use it or recycle it and build our own ships with the resources, but since this is my first captured ship, I will keep it and use it to guard my base while I build up my own fleet, though I might upgrade the ship a little bit. Well, that was a quick look at the start of a campaign and a bit of an overview of From the Depths. As I said, I'm really impressed with the content in this game, especially considering that it is in early access and, at least according to the version number, still in alpha. Well, and this is it for this video. I hope it was enjoyable, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.